For anyone watching today who is wondering why this is not an Ollie sat next to me on the sofa, this is James Walker. And if you have not seen the previous video that we did talking about golfer's elbow and some physio and rehab stuff, James is a physio who works out of the Sheffield Climbing Clinic. He's based in Sheffield, it's in the name. And we've worked with James on a number of occasions with both our coaches and our clients. If you look in the links below, we'll put some links to James's physio clinic. You can book up and go and see him if you want to, you like what you hear. And also you can follow him on social media, I guess, if they can find you.
Yeah, on Instagram, it's just at Sheffield Climbing Clinic.
Okay, yeah. Yep. And Twitter, Facebook, anything like
that? No.
No, not on there, just Instagram.
Yeah.
Yep. It works still.
It works, yeah.
So we've got James on the channel to be able to really kind of add in and build some of the expertise and knowledge around rehab, injuries, and how we really manage our bodies. And adding on from what we did previously with golfer's elbow, today we're going to be looking at self-massage. And I think this is a really fascinating area because there's lots and lots of tools out there nowadays that all of you probably already use or are familiar with. And you may well be wondering about which ones are the best ones, the kind of methods to use, and what do people like James think of self-massage, and is it worthwhile? So should we start off with, what is self-massage? What's occurring? Why are we doing it?
So self-massage is usually something that people would do maybe after exercise. And the reason that they're doing it mostly is to try and sort of promote recovery, I suppose. Another reason that people would do it would be maintenance, injury prevention, and the other reason they would do it is because it feels good, or they feel better the next day after they do it, really. But fundamentally, I would say that most of the types of self-massage, or self-release would be another term for it, is working in similar ways, really, in terms of what actually it's doing.
Would you say that there's a difference between the term self-massage and self-release? Is it the same thing? Is there any nuanced difference between it? Because both of those words are used a lot in any place that we work, or we see on social media, or we read on the internet.
I think fundamentally they're trying to achieve the same thing. I guess self-massage would be more of a generalized area. You might sort of massage the forearm muscles and kind of not spend any particular amount of time on one specific area. An example of a self-release would be a tightness into the top of like the trapezius muscle up here, and where you'd maybe put a pressure on it for 30 seconds or a minute to try and help release the tension in there. But in terms of the objective of why people are doing these things, they're pretty much the same. There's slightly different methods, in the same way that, I don't know, for example, if you were to have a sports massage, the sports masseur would do different techniques of massage, but really why you're going there and what you're hoping to achieve is the same sort of thing.
Okay, and when we talk about massage and doing this self-release, are we seeing structural changes in the muscle? So are we, for example, creating trauma and breaking down that soft tissue structure, or are we really talking about creating changes in tension in the muscle or blood flow, for example? What's occurring when we're doing this, this massage?
So you're not really changing structure as such. So sometimes people think that they might be able to break down scar tissue and things like that by self-release, but I don't really think that's happening. We spoke in the other video about like tendinopathy and remodeling the tendon and the tendon adapting. A lot of the time when you're doing exercise, for example, to try and rehabilitate something, you're sort of adapting and remodeling the tissue through progressive loading. However, self-massage release won't really do that. You're not kind of breaking down the scarring in the tissue and things like that. Most self-massage or self-release works in the same way. The main thing that you're doing with it is increasing blood flow to the area. And the reason that you want to do that is two things. One, improving blood flow to an area will increase the amount of oxygenated blood to that area, and that will help with recovery and healing of any tissues, for example, the muscle. When you do exercise, you get sort of little bits of micro trauma within the muscle, and then the body will recover and then decide to make that muscle stronger so it can cope with the exercise that you do the next time, and that's how you get stronger. So in terms of increasing blood flow, it will help to promote that recovery quicker. And also what you're doing is the increased blood flow will mean blood will come in and out of the area, and when blood goes out of the area, it will take what we call like inflammatory waste products. So the classic thing people know about is like lactic acid after exercise, and if that sits and pools within the muscle, that can cause pain because of the sort of what we call like the chemical irritation of that lactic acid within the area. So yeah, you're increasing blood flow to the area, and that's pretty much the main thing. But there's a couple of other things that it will help with as well. Sort of, I guess the term like the pliability of the muscle, the like loosening off of the muscle that people talk about.
So this is kind of like talking about like when I might have been sat in, my laptop typing away for ages, and I'm just, you can just feel his shoulders rise, and I'm just really tight. And sometimes it almost goes up into your head as well, and you end up with sort of headaches and pain in your neck. Are we talking about changing the tension in that muscle?
Yeah, exactly. That's where we talk about like the pliability of the muscle or loosening off the muscle. If you kind of do some self-massage or self-release, it will help to sort of relax that muscle, I guess, so there's not as much tension. Linking into the next thing that it helps to do is, and maybe why actually it relaxes and releases off, is because it helps to inhibit pain. And that works by something called like the sort of like the pain gate mechanism. Yeah, do you want me to explain?
Yeah. I think I'm very aware of how the pain gate mechanism works, and I think it's a really interesting concept. And it might, for some of you who haven't heard this before, it might kind of blow your mind of why we've done things like like we talk about with the kids.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it's that simple concept of, say for example, you walk through a door and bang your elbow. The first thing you will do is kind of like go to rub it. And if you're a kid or something like that, maybe your parents used to kind of like rub something better. Do you know what I mean? Now you think, well, why were they doing that? Why does doing that make it feel instantly better? And the reason is because within a certain area, let's take, the outside of the elbow, you bang the outside of the elbow. There's, in simple terms, imagine there's a certain number of receptors within that section of the tissue that you've just banged. That'll be sending pain signals to the brain, okay? Now those same receptors also send pressure signals to the brain, but they're the same receptors. So if you rub yourself, or if you do some self-massage or things like that, you are dampening down the amount of pain that your brain perceives or receives, because it also has to receive the signals of you rubbing it or self-massaging it and something like that. So for that period of time, you get your brain gets a decreased amount of pain within that area.
It's kind of like an analgesic effect, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. It's really interesting, and maybe that is possibly a way that why the muscle then relaxes off, because the pain's kind of, it's a protective mechanism, the body's tightening up, and then the pain decreases slightly, and it thinks, okay, well, we don't need to have that tension in there, or we're not getting that negative pain signal anymore. So that's another reason it would work.
And would you say, as a response to that, and sort of understanding how that phenomenon works, and what occurs within the muscle with massage, is it something that we should consider a frequent but low duration activity, so we do it quite a lot throughout the week? Or is it something that just solves your issues by a monster 2-hour session, for example?
No, you don't want to be doing hours and hours of self-massage or self-release, because what you can sometimes get is you can kind of overdo it and you can end up irritating the area or irritating the muscle. I've seen that before in things like foam rolling. Lots of times people like kind of will foam roll the outside of the leg or the front of the thigh and really sort of like get stuck into it because again, sometimes more is better than what people perceive, you know what I mean? Like it really gets stuck into there. But you can then get past the point where you've done the desired effect of the increased blood flow and the other things. And that doesn't necessarily take that long. But then you can overdo it and sometimes you can like bruise the muscle and things like that for sure. People watching this and yourself probably as well, you'll have done self-release and self-massage and then the next day you've thought, oh, I've done that too much. It's more painful than anything than it was before. So no, you absolutely want to be doing it frequently, little and often, I suppose, rather than just kind of doing it, you know, every week, a mammoth session for sure.
Yeah, okay. And would you say that also, I know you touched just briefly there about the kind of nerves and irritation of the nerves, so you can do that sort of, you do some of that kind of like foam rolling and the sort of ITB work that runners often do. Yeah. Do you think that we should be similarly cautious with climbers and, you know, issues with ulnar and radial nerve? You know, how do you think that we should treat that, and what areas are we looking for on the arm in particular with climbers that we, you know, some nerves sit very close to the surface, so we have to be a little bit careful, don't we?
Yeah, so the most common one is, say, the ulnar nerve. So most people will have, we call it here like you bang your funny bone, that's what people call it, and that's what they're actually doing there, is they're hitting the ulnar nerve, which actually runs just in this groove here. And sometimes people will then bang that and they get like pins and needles into these two fingers. So for sure, if you're not aware of the anatomy, which I guess obviously not too many people will know the ins and outs of where the nerves go in the body. Who's going to know that really? So it's just an understanding and awareness of that. Most people will know about it when you're doing self-release techniques. There'll be areas that are more sore to release off, and that tends to be around the bony structures. You know what I mean? So inside of the elbow. People will get soreness if they hit, say, the ulnar nerve on the inside of the elbow, or they might get soreness if they really get into where the tendon attaches to the bone. So a lot of the time it's actually quite useful to be massaging the muscle belly itself, because the muscles have good blood supply, and if you're just massaging over the tendon, you might not get that same reaction of increased blood flow because the tendons don't have much blood flow compared to the muscles, so you're not going to achieve that. So yeah, for sure you need to be aware of areas to kind of not work on too much.
I think that's something that I've found as a climber and a coach, that some people can have quite long, intense self-massage sessions, and they have that analgesic effect where the pain really numbs down, and then they can not be quite as aware how much they can be irritating and overworking an area where they're sort of working heavily on a nerve, and they can sort of desensitize and think, oh yeah, I'm really getting into an area there, but actually what they're doing is they're massaging a nerve and they're getting a clear signal that's coming back from that. So I think it's important to understand that difference, isn't it, between muscle discomfort and nerve pain.
And also it's just as important to understand that more of something isn't always better. Most of the time it isn't. And what are you trying to achieve by doing those sort of monster sessions of self-release? It's the same with training, isn't it? You think, okay, well, I'll just double my training all of a sudden and that'll just surely improve it. It's the same with self-release. It's got to be, I always say this with most things like this, including rehab, training, self-release, self-massage, whatever it may be. Being consistent with it is absolutely key. People go through phases, don't they? Like, I'm really going to get top on my mobility and my stretching and my self-massage and self-release and whatever. And it's like every day this week I'm going to do it. And then in 3 weeks they've stopped doing it altogether. And it's about just building into that routine and doing it at certain times. People often ask me, when is the best time to do this stuff? Morning is better, evening is better, when's the best time? For me, it's when you can do it. If I say to them, okay, evening for sure is the best time, but then they get home, they're busy, they can't fit it in, then it's better to do it in the morning and not do it at all. after exercise for sure. Like, I'm not sure, climbers, some are good, some aren't very good in terms of you finish your session at the crag or you finish your session at a climbing wall. I'd say most people just pack up and off they go home. So even after a session, just spending 10, 15 minutes just doing a little bit of this work, or when you get home doing that as well, it will be super helpful for sure.
Okay, yeah, that's good. So today what we were going to do is I've got this massage gun, which I think is going to be really good to have a look through how we specifically use this particular device, and have a little bit of kind of a work through on our arms and, you know, deal with a muscle group that's relevant to climbers. But before we do that, should we have a little kind of quick run through on all the different tools and methods that we can use? Because, you know, these guns have become really popular in the last year or so, and they're often quite affordable for a lot of people, and they take a lot of effort out because you don't have to, you know, put the effort in yourself. A machine does it. But I think it's good to know that there's other options out there as well. So what would you say as the sort of the tools in the toolbox that we have at our disposal?
Most common ones, so the most common ones that climbers will use tend to be foam rollers.
Lots of different sizes on those.
Lots of different sizes, lots of different colours, some with bobbles on, some are smooth.
Any opinions on which are best?
No, not really. I personally find the ones with the bobbles and knobbly bits on them are quite uncomfortable if you're sort of like working on your back, but they're probably quite effective if you're working on like your legs or your calf and things like that. The different sizes, and then sometimes it comes down to practicality. A lot of them are kind of 30 centimetres or so, but then some of them are longer, around about 90 centimetres. It means you can lay on them and then do some shoulder stretches and stuff. Again, it's one of those things, people are often after which is the best one, but it's there's not really an answer to that, and again, they will be doing the same sort of thing. I personally have one of the smooth ones because I find it just a bit more comfortable. But yeah, they're in terms of what they're doing, the different, you look at foam rollers and you look online and decide which one to get. There's hundreds, isn't there? But fundamentally, it's they're all working in the same sort of way, and it's whatever.
Do balls fit in the same kind of thing, like a sort of lacrosse balls, tennis balls?
Yeah, massage balls. So lacrosse balls, tennis balls, specific massage balls themselves. There's little spiky balls that you can get.
Yeah, seen those.
Tennis balls. People use a golf ball, squash, whatever. But they are absolutely working in all the same way, and they are part of the release self-massage sort of toolkit. And a lot of the time, people use them either where they will sort of use the ball, maybe like roll it themselves or use it here, or they kind of put it against the wall or on the floor and move around it, or they will actually lay onto the ball and then move an arm. Do you know what I mean? So it kind of, but fundamentally, if you think about those things, it's all doing the same stuff. It's helping to move the tissue, and like we've just said before, it'll help with increased blood flow and pain relief and stuff like that. So you've got the balls. You have also those canes. I think they're called like ferrocanes or
so like the S shape.
Yeah, the S shapes, or just like a J shape, R shape, whatever you want to call it. And again, they're the things that they have like knobbly bits on them, and you see people often sat kind of working on the middle of the back or getting into knotted areas. And that's that would probably, we talked about before, the self-release and self-massage. That would maybe be more in the self-release section, because people tend to find a tight spot and sort of really just work on that and push into it, whereas a foam roller, you tend to be more sort of rolling up and over and massaging an area. Does that make sense? So yeah, they're the things that most climbers will certainly... Arm aids, so the arm aid is like a clamp device, isn't it, that will work on the flexor and extensor muscles. They're pretty specific to the forearm. I'm sure people have tried to use them on different parts of the upper arm and whatever, but yeah, they're fundamentally just to kind of work on the forearm. And they're almost like a stepping stone towards the massage gun, really, aren't they? Because it kind of takes out the work necessarily that you have to put in yourself. You can sit with it on here and you can sort of use that. And maybe the things like the pressure on them and the desired effect is a little bit more efficient, just because of the way that you can get a little bit more pressure and things like that on it. But again, we'll go back to the same thing. They're all doing the same process, basically, just maybe some are easier to use or more efficient than others. But I think people have their go-to. Like I have lots of patients who I say, okay, what do you use? Oh, this really works for me, and this doesn't, and I don't really like that, and whatever. So I think for people out there, you need to be inform yourself about what you're actually trying to achieve with it, and then get a sort of method or regime that works for them, really.
Yeah, I think from my perspective, from working with others and seeing what will work for you, is that I very rarely say to people, you should go and use this tool. This is the thing that you've got to use, because it's so important to make the tool that you have match up with what you, one, enjoy using, two, is flexible enough and convenient to use, because it's really hard working on something which is really hard to get hold of, or is too expensive for you to be used, or is only accessible in your attic and that's the only place you can go to do it. And then three is that you feel a response from using that tool that feels positive to you, because if you look at the research and the evidence that comes out of the massage world, the massage industry, that area, it's very limited in terms of saying this thing is the best, you'll get this kind of response. There's a lack of interventional studies that we have, hard sports science that we can rely on in this area, and that's why there's a lot of contention around it, particularly especially with the foam rolling. And there's huge advocates of this, but then there's a lot of people that spend their time saying, where's my study for this? Where's my results for this?
And I think the reason for that fundamentally is because it's so subjective. Mm-hmm. Like if you foam roll or you do some self-massage, self-release, what is happening, and also what is the perception to the person? Have they recovered? Because it's not something that we can say, okay, well, this is exactly what it's done, and this is the effect, and this is how it's helped. It's more of a, like a generalized thing. Like if you do some self-massage or self-release, how exactly has it improved your recovery or performance, or the amount of pain that you've got out of it that day instantly, or the next day, or the day after, or the week after? It's very hard to quantify. So yeah, you have sometimes people who, exactly like you say, they'll be saying, don't bother with foam rollers, a waste of time, it's not helping, and things like that. And other people who absolutely swear by it.
That's why it's so personalised.
It's exactly, yeah. And it's important, I think, to try and be as informed as possible. But like you say, there's not huge amounts of evidence and research that we can go to say, okay, we can now, from new research, say that this is not worth doing, and this is worth doing. So yeah, it's about being individual, but then it's about what works for the person. Like you say, that you might say, okay, well, the massage gun, that's the best possible thing to use, but is it that person, is it affordable? Is it easy for the person to use? And have they got, or a foam roller, have they got space to use it? Have they got, this, that, and the other? So it's all individual, really.
Yeah. Well, I think we should probably get onto using this thing and talking about it. For anyone that's watching, this is this particular device is called the RoboTime. We've been sent this by the guys at RoboTime, and we've been using and trialing this for about probably 4 to 6 weeks so far. It's stayed in my house, probably to the frustration to a lot of other people in the Lattice team, because I've really, really liked it. I use this almost daily now, so we're going to talk through some of the things that I have done. And we'll also put in the links below. We've got a discount code. It's quite a significant saving if you're interested in looking at purchasing something like this. So we'll put that in the description below. But in terms of using this kind of device, I think the first thing is to know that we don't want to excessively, use it in terms of time and duration, and also in terms of the settings that we use on it as well. We don't want to go in on full hardcore, 5 out of 5 settings initially, isn't it?
Exactly. It's like anything. I think if someone first got out of the box and maybe get a bit excited and kind of just spend hours sort of having a go at different areas of the body and this, that and the other. But it's like anything. Any form of new kind of training or new thing that you're trying or new part of your regime and whatever, you just need to take it sort of steady and build it up, see how you react, because we were talking about self-massage and self-release helps with pain relief, but if you can do too much, it'll go the opposite way and it can irritate the tissue. But different people, in the same way that different people will react differently to certain exercise or training, different people will react differently to this. Some people, 30 seconds on an area, they'll feel like it's kind of quite intense on a certain setting, and other people might be able to go for sort of 5 minutes or so. And it depends how big the muscles are, how, things like that, the structure of the muscles or the different person, how big of a person they are and stuff like that. So it's, just that sort of common sense approach to building it up, really.
Opinions on widgets to put on the end? We've got, the balls, we've got these things that compress at the end, they've got a bit of give.
Yeah.
We've got the, the hardcore prodder that digs right in. Any professional opinion on whether you just sort of move them around and find out what works best for that part of the body? What do you feel like as a
so
these things?
Realistically, the differences with these is the intensity of the massage gun on the area. Using this kind of pointy one here will mean that the effect of it will be much more intense. But the thing is, if you use this around sort of like sensitive areas, we're talking about the inside the elbow, it will probably be quite sore actually. So if you are wanting to get into an area that's a little bit more sensitive, you might want to use just kind of a more of a general one like this. The truth is similar to what I was saying before, like don't go into it too quickly. It is a bit of trial and error, for sure. Like people who have this device and have these different ones, they will use it completely differently. But again, what I'll go back to is if you think about what the principles are of what you're trying to achieve, again, these will work in a similar way and they'll have the desired effect, but it's about what's sort of comfortable for you. But it's a little bit of trial and error to start with, really.
Yeah. I mean, like what I often do with the forearms is, so if I put so I'll go for like a blunt object initially, and I think this is probably, applying the same sort of pressure use principle that you've talked about of going, light and easy initially and choosing something like a bigger, blunter force. And I'll put it on quite a low setting that, this is like a 1 out of 5. And then I'll just work over the muscle and the forearm belly quite lightly initially. And I'll do this for kind of a minute or so, and I'll work over the flexors, the extensors as well, and I'll stay, well away from coming in round by the elbow, anywhere that I'm going to have any sensitivity. Likewise, I avoid coming up towards the wrist, and any areas like that. And then once in a way, it's almost like a desensitization that occurs initially. Over that first minute, I'll swap that out, and I'll take that off, and then swap it out for actually like a little bit more of a sort of pointed, harder end, and that's where from there, once I've kind of had that understanding of what feels tight and where I want to go into, I'll then work a little bit harder in on those areas. And I've certainly not found that there's any difference between using this on a low setting or any of these devices on a low setting and applying pressure with my other hand and getting that feedback that way versus cranking it right up and going to 5 out of 5 at a really high setting. I personally haven't found any difference on that. I don't know what your opinions on that sort of thing are.
Yeah, exactly. Again, it will be the same as what I was saying before. It will be sort of individualized. People will find it different. What you are basically just doing then is quite important. That what you kind of want to do is work on the whole of the forearm muscle, like you were saying. You want to kind of get into there, and it's, I guess, just understanding the anatomy of where these muscles are. You are mostly working the muscles here. Do you know what I mean? So, for example, if you have like a tendon issue, sometimes people really work on the tendon because it feels quite intense and it feels like it maybe is doing something. But a lot of what you're actually trying to achieve with this is to work on the actual muscles themselves and get an increased blood flow and help recovery for that. But the great thing about these is, look at what we're doing now. We're sat on the sofa and
you can chat, you can do other things.
Yeah, chat and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And realistically, that's why one of the main reasons why these are popular and they're so useful is because, like I was saying before about consistency and getting into a regime, it's much easier to do that if you are if it's easy to do. Does that make sense? That's why these are
well, so the other thing is, like,
really.
you know, if you were trying to do some self-massage in your forearm here now, is you might have had to get your oils out.
Yeah.
And, you know, you might need to go and do some cooking in a second, or you've got to go back to work. And it's just so impractical compared to some other things. And I've also found that as a climber, that if I have a long, hard session, I've been down the wall 3 hours, I'm, you know, fingerboarding, I've been in the wall a lot, and I'm just tired in my forearms. And one of the last things I want to do is then go in and have a hard, intensive massage on myself. And some of these positions can be quite awkward with my own hands, which are tired. Then I can just get a gun out and use these things. And I know that they're, you know, they're an investment, and they're not as cheap as a tennis ball, for example. But if you think about the flexibility you get from it, the accessibility, total convenience, to me, it feels like an easy win.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's just, I don't know, for example, in climbers, obviously sometimes you can get really tight into your lats and things like that. And it's just the ease of use. That's why they're useful. Like, again, using a tennis ball or a foam roller will still have the desired effect, but it's just the fact that you can sit here and say, okay, well, that very specific point is tight, and it's actually quite awkward to find a position where you can get a massage ball to put the pressure on and keep on that one spot. And that's why they're useful more than anything, because they have the effect of the things that we spoke about at the start in terms of the reason why self-massage and self-release is useful, but it's just easy and convenient, and you're, I guess, probably more likely to do it more often with this than other areas. But if people are disciplined, again, what we were talking about before, it's about being consistent with the self-release, self-massage sort of techniques. That is the most important thing.
So to finish up, what would you say if I gave you the generic global climber and said to you, you can have your climbing population do some kind of self-massage, self-release on 3 areas of the body that would be, you know, beneficial to them. You think these areas typically would have benefit to the general population. I know everyone's, you know, very individual. What are the 3 areas where you think this is worthwhile?
For climbers?
Yeah, for climbers.
So the areas that climbers tend to get tight into, for sure, are flexor and extensor muscles of their forearms, shoulders into their what we call the upper trapezius muscle here, tends to get very tight, and then also underneath their arms, the sort of lats. Those would be for sure the 3 areas that.
So lats, traps, flexors, extensors, forearm. Yeah, okay. And I'm assuming you chose those over hips and legs because you don't see them as much of a limiting factor for other people, or you think people are generally good at doing their flexibility, mobility work for their lower body over their upper body? What's the kind of the thought behind that?
Yeah, that's a good point. So obviously with the simple fact is with climbers, it is mostly an upper body activity.
Or upper body limited.
Yeah, exactly. So in terms of doing self-massage work after a session or something like that, after training, they're going to be the areas that you maybe want to target the most, and the areas that have worked the most, therefore, will get tighter and will get sore and things like that. But yeah, we just don't see as many people complaining of tightness in their hamstrings and calf muscles and their glutes and things like that with climbers compared to, I don't know, if this was a runner's conversation, it'd be the absolutely other way around for sure.
Yeah, yeah, and you'd probably be sort of advising a completely different set of self-care regimes for runners versus climbers.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's just the opposite, probably.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's absolutely brilliant. Yeah, thanks very much, James.
No
and for all of you listening, hope you've enjoyed it. We've gone through a few different tools there. And we'll put links down below to all the relevant stuff to do with the massage gun. Also for James's clinic in Sheffield. I think you do remote consultations as well, is that right?
Yes, we do remote consultations. Been doing lots of those over lockdown all around the world. So yeah, we can speak to you wherever you are, really.
Brilliant, easy. So we will see you again very soon, and thanks for watching.